Broadside Books and Harper Audio present Lessons in Liberty, 30 Rules for Living from 10 Extraordinary Americans by Jeremy S. Adams. Read by Fred Sanders. To my endlessly supportive older brothers, Howard and Will, if our fates are framed by the souls we love in this life, then being your younger brother has been the greatest boon of all. We are like dwarfs sitting on the shoulders of giants. We see more and things that are more distant than they did, not because our sight is superior or because we are taller than they, but because they raise us up, and by their great stature add to ours. John of Salisbury. And the most glorious exploits do not always furnish us with the clearest discoveries of virtue or vice in men. Sometimes a matter of less moment, an expression or a jest, informs us better of their characters and inclinations than the most famous sieges, the greatest armaments, or the bloodiest battles whatsoever. Plutarch, The Lives of the Noble Grecians and Romans. Introduction. It was probably the most inspiring moment I have ever experienced in my years as a high school teacher. Sadly, it didn't occur in my classroom, but it did take place during a school event. At the time, I was already in the stretch of my teaching career in which all school rallies tested the endurance of my middle-aged eardrums. The gymnasium on my campus is ancient. The air conditioning doesn't work particularly well, especially when 1,000 students are jammed into the bleachers. The acoustics are horrendous. And to be honest, the unfettered buffoonery of the games and activities always left me feeling like a bit of a crank. The rally began as all rallies do, with a student singing the national anthem. The student stood, the female student began to sing, but within a few seconds she ran into trouble. Not because she couldn't hit the high notes or remember the words. Her microphone had suddenly died. But instead of silence, something utterly astonishing happened. The students quickly picked up where she left off, not just mumbling the lyrics, but collectively belting out the Star-Spangled Banner with an effusive pride and vitality that shocked and delighted my fellow faculty members. I can remember dropped jaws and whispered wows coming from more than a few teachers. Even today, this memory from almost a decade ago never fails to stir the deepest emotions of my teacher soul, not simply because I recall the exhilaration of being inspired by the student body, but because I cannot help but wonder today how modern students would respond to the same situation. I'm quite certain the outcome would be colossally different and, yes, disappointing. Would the students today even be standing? Would they know the words of the national anthem? Would they feel compelled to sing it? I have spent my entire adult life teaching American civics to young Americans on the cusp of adulthood. It is impossible for me to become a fashionable cynic about the United States of America when I have witnessed thousands of our young people do extraordinary things with their lives, many of them from backgrounds of deep disadvantage, triumphing against despairing odds because they believed in themselves and the power of individual liberty. I am, thus, an unapologetic romantic about the United States. This romanticism does not come from a naive or Pollyannish belief that America can do no wrong. Far from it. My titanic affection for this nation arises from my hope of what it can and should be. It is inspired by an unshakable faith in the animating ideals that birthed our founding documents and spurred each successive generation to inch closer to a more perfect union. But what I have witnessed in the past decade is a plaintive pivot away from empowering optimism and toward a contemptuous cynicism about American civilization and its history. This scorn has exploded on a scale and with a celerity that is difficult to fathom. The iconoclasm of our age has led to broad discouragement and civic embarrassment among American youth. A jaw-dropping 40% of Gen Zers now characterize America's founders as villains. Many of my current and former students now ask questions that betray a deep suspicion of national pride. Should they stand or kneel?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?